Ethan Grant walked into the jewelry store on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. He wasn't one to spend much time shopping for himself, but today was different. His wife, Claire, had been hinting about wanting something special for their upcoming anniversary, and Ethan decided it was finally time to surprise her. The store was located in the heart of downtown Chicago, surrounded by towering skyscrapers that reflected the late autumn sunlight. It was a place where luxury met sophistication, and every detail inside seemed designed to make customers feel like royalty. As soon as Ethan stepped through the door, a soft chime rang out, announcing his arrival. The air inside smelled faintly, of polished wood and fresh flowers. Display cases lined the walls, each one filled with glittering pieces of jewelry, diamond rings, pearl necklaces, and gold bracelets, all neatly arranged under soft lighting. A young woman dressed in a crisp, black and white uniform approached him with a welcoming smile. "Good afternoon, sir," she said politely. "May I assist you?" "Yes," Ethan replied, returning her smile briefly. "I'm looking for something unique, a gift for my wife." The saleswoman nodded enthusiastically. "Of course. We have some beautiful pieces here. Do you have anything specific in mind?" Ethan hesitated for a moment. He wasn't exactly sure what Claire would like, but he knew it needed to be meaningful, something more than just another expensive trinket. As he followed the saleswoman to the first display case, his eyes wandered across the various items laid out before him. Rings, earrings, brooches, they all sparkled invitingly, but none of them felt quite right. Then something caught his eye. At the far end of the counter, nestled among several other pendants, was a delicate piece of jewelry that made his breath catch. It wasn't particularly flashy or extravagant, but there was something familiar about it. The pendant was circular, with an intricate floral pattern etched into its surface. At its center sat a tiny blue gemstone that shimmered faintly under the light. For a moment, Ethan thought he might be imagining things, but no, the resemblance was undeniable. His heart began to race as memories flooded back. That pendant looked identical to the one his daughter Lily had been wearing the last time he saw her. 5 years ago, Lily had gone missing without a trace. Her disappearance had torn their family apart, leaving behind unanswered questions and endless pain. Ethan had spent countless sleepless nights wondering if she was still alive, searching for any clue that could bring her home. And now, standing in this jewelry store, he couldn't shake the feeling that fate had brought him here for a reason. "Excuse me," Ethan said, pointing to the pendant. "Can you tell me more about that piece?" The saleswoman retrieved it from the display and placed it gently on the counter. "Certainly," she said. "This pendant is part of a recent consignment we received from an estate sale. Unfortunately, we don't know much about its history beyond that." Ethan picked up the pendant carefully, examining it closely. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned it over in his hand. There was no mistaking it. It was the same design, down to the smallest detail. Even the tiny scratch on the back matched perfectly. How could this be? Could it really belong to Lily? Or was it just a coincidence? "I'd like to buy this," Ethan said abruptly, interrupting the saleswoman mid-sentence. She blinked in surprise, but quickly recovered. "Of course, sir. Let me wrap it up for you." While she busied herself packaging the pendant, Ethan's mind raced. He needed answers. Who had sold this piece? Where did it come from? These questions burned inside him, demanding attention. When the transaction was complete, Ethan forced himself to remain calm. "Do you happen to know who brought this in?" he asked casually. The saleswoman glanced at her records. "It was sold to us by a gentleman named Daniel Harper. He mentioned finding it during a hiking trip near Lake Michigan." Ethan thanked her and left the store, clutching the small bag containing the pendant tightly. Outside, the city buzzed with life, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was the possibility that this discovery might lead him closer to finding Lily. Whatever it took, he vowed to follow this trail until he uncovered the truth. Eyes of being interested in purchasing more items from his collection. Ethan accompanied him, wanting to observe firsthand how Daniel reacted when questioned about the pendant. They met at a small cafe near Daniel's apartment. Daniel was a wiry man in his early 30s with scruffy hair and a nervous energy about him. He greeted them cautiously but warmed up once they started talking about his hobby. "So, you're collectors?" Daniel asked, sipping his coffee. "Something like that," Ryan replied smoothly. "We're particularly interested in unique pieces, things with history, like that pendant you sold recently." At the mention of the pendant, Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Oh yeah, that one. Pretty cool, huh? Found it during one of my hikes." "Where exactly did you find it?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Daniel hesitated before answering. Just outside the city, near Lake Michigan. There are these old ruins there. People say they're haunted or something. I go exploring sometimes, see what I can dig up." Ethan exchanged a glance with Ryan. Something about Daniel's story didn't add up. If the pendant truly belonged to Lily, how had it ended up in some random ruin far from where she disappeared? And why did Daniel seem so uneasy discussing it? Ryan decided to press further. "Did you notice anything unusual when you found it? Any signs of recent activity?" Daniel shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "Not really, just the usual stuff. Broken glass, graffiti. Honestly, I didn't think much of it at the time." Despite his evasive answers, Ethan sensed that Daniel wasn't telling the whole truth. Still, pushing too hard might make him clam up entirely, so they thanked him and left the cafe. Back in Ryan's car, Ethan turned to him with frustration, written all over his face. "Do you believe him?" Ryan sighed, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. "Not entirely, but we've got enough to go on for now. Let's focus on those ruins he mentioned. Maybe there's something there worth checking out." The next morning, Ryan called Ethan with new information. While reviewing Daniel's online posts, Ryan had stumbled upon a photo showing the same pendant lying among other objects in what appeared to be a dark, abandoned building. The caption read, "Found this beauty while exploring the old asylum last weekend." An asylum? That changed everything. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Urban legends about the place were well known. It had been shut down decades ago, due to reports of unethical experiments and strange occurrences. Could Lily somehow be connected to this eerie location? With no time to waste, Ethan and Ryan made plans to visit the asylum themselves. They packed flashlights, cameras, and basic supplies, knowing they'd need to tread carefully in such a dangerous environment. As they drove toward the outskirts of the city, Ethan stared out the window, his thoughts consumed by the possibility of finally finding answers. Whatever awaited them at the asylum, he was ready to face it head-on. Ethan Grant and Ryan Cole arrived at the old asylum just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The place looked even more foreboding in person than it did in the photos Daniel Harper had posted online. Tall weeds sprouted from cracks in the pavement and vines snaked their way up the crumbling brick walls. Broken windows stared out like empty eyes, giving the impression that the building itself was watching them. "This place gives me the creeps," Ryan muttered as they stepped out of the car. He adjusted the strap of his backpack, which held their supplies, flashlights, cameras, notebooks, and bottled water. Ethan nodded silently, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. This could be the key to finding Lily. Or it could be nothing more than a dead end. Either way, he wasn't leaving until he knew for sure. The heavy iron gate creaked loudly as they pushed it open, the sound echoing through the deserted grounds. Inside, the air smelled damp and musty, carrying traces of mold and decay. They moved carefully, shining their flashlights ahead to guide the way. Every step stirred up clouds of dust and the floorboards groaned under their weight, making Ethan flinch each time. "Let's start on the first floor," Ryan suggested, pointing toward a set of double doors leading deeper into the building. "If there's anything left behind, it'll probably be somewhere easy to access." As they entered what appeared to be an old waiting area, Ethan noticed remnants of furniture scattered around. Broken chairs, rusted filing cabinets, and faded posters peeling off the walls. It was clear no one had been here in decades, yet something about the scene felt off, almost staged. Some of the debris seemed too deliberately placed, as if someone had recently disturbed the area. "Look at this," Ryan said suddenly, kneeling beside a pile of blankets tucked into a corner. Someone's been staying here. Ethan frowned, stepping closer. Sure enough, the blankets were worn but clean, and nearby lay a few canned food containers and a half-empty bottle of water. Whoever had been living here hadn't been gone long. Could it have been Daniel? Or was there someone else connected to Lily's disappearance hiding out in this forgotten place? They continued exploring, moving from room to room. Most were empty or filled with junk, but one caught Ethan's attention. It was smaller than the others, with peeling wallpaper and a single desk shoved against the far wall. On the desk sat a tattered notebook, its pages fluttering slightly in the draft from the broken window. Ethan picked it up, feeling a strange sense of familiarity as he flipped it open. The handwriting inside made his breath catch. It was messy but unmistakable. Lily's. Each page contained fragments of thoughts, sketches, and notes about her surroundings. She wrote about hearing strange voices in her dreams, seeing flashes of unfamiliar places, and feeling like she was being watched, even when she was alone. One entry stood out. "They're trying to reach me. I don't know who they are, but they're pulling me somewhere else. Somewhere not here. I can feel it happening every time I close my eyes." Ethan's hands trembled as he turned the pages. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized his daughter had been trapped in this nightmare for years. But how? And why? The entries hinted at something beyond ordinary reality. Experiments involving dreams and alternate dimensions. Whatever had happened to Lily, it wasn't natural. Ryan watched silently as Ethan absorbed the contents of the notebook. When Ethan finally looked up, his face was pale but resolute. "We need to figure out what these experiments were," he said firmly. "If we can understand what happened to her, maybe we can find a way to bring her back." Ryan nodded. "Agreed. Let's keep looking for clues. There might be equipment or records left behind that explain what went on here." They spent hours combing through the asylum, uncovering bits and pieces of evidence. In one room, they found old medical devices covered in dust, along with folders labeled Project Dreamweaver. The documents inside were heavily redacted, but snippets of information suggested the experiments involved altering human consciousness to explore other planes of existence. It sounded like science fiction, yet the proof was right in front of them. By the time they decided to leave, night had fully fallen. Exhausted but determined, Ethan clutched the notebook tightly as they made their way back to the car. He didn't know exactly what they were dealing with, but one thing was certain. Lily was still alive, somewhere beyond the boundaries of this world, and Ethan would do whatever it took to bring her home. As they drove away from the asylum, Ethan glanced at the notebook again. The words on its pages burned in his mind, fueling his resolve. No matter how impossible it seemed, he believed now more than ever that finding Lily wasn't just a dream. It was possible. After leaving the asylum, Ethan knew they needed help to make sense of what they had found. The notebook hinted at experiments involving alternate dimensions, but understanding how those experiments worked and whether they could be replicated was far beyond his expertise. That's when Ryan suggested reaching out to Dr. Emily Ross, a physicist known for her work in quantum mechanics and fringe theories. Though she was often dismissed as eccentric by her peers, her research aligned closely with the clues they had uncovered. Ethan contacted Dr. Ross immediately, explaining the situation and sharing the contents of Lily's notebook. To his relief, she agreed to meet them at her private lab, tucked away in an industrial part of the city. When they arrived, the lab looked like something straight out of a science fiction movie. Machines buzzed softly, and colorful wires snaked across every surface. In the middle of the room stood a large metallic device that resembled a cross between a particle accelerator and a teleportation chamber. Dr. Ross greeted them warmly, her sharp eyes scanning their faces as if trying to gauge their seriousness. She was in her late 40s with graying hair tied back in a loose bun and glasses perched on the bridge of her nose. Despite her calm demeanor, there was an intensity about her that made it clear she took her work very seriously. "So," she began, gesturing for them to sit down, "you believe your daughter crossed into another dimension during these experiments?" Ethan nodded, clutching the notebook tightly. Yes. Her writings describe strange dreams and visions, and she mentions feeling pulled toward somewhere else. We think whatever happened to her might have opened a doorway to another reality. Dr. Ross studied the notebook carefully, flipping through its pages with growing interest. After a few moments, she set it down and turned to face them. If what you're saying is true, then we're dealing with phenomena rooted in quantum, entanglement, and parallel universes. These concepts are theoretical but not entirely impossible. The question is, can we recreate the conditions described here? She pointed to one of the entries where Lily mentioned machines humming around her and a sensation of falling through space. Based on this, I suspect the experiments used sound frequencies and electromagnetic fields to destabilize the barrier between dimensions. If we can mimic those conditions, we might be able to create a temporary rift. Ryan raised an eyebrow skeptically. And you're sure this won't just blow us all up or something? Dr. Ross chuckled dryly. There are risks, yes. Crossing dimensions isn't exactly safe territory. But if we proceed carefully, we can minimize the danger. Of course, once the portal opens, navigating it will be another challenge entirely. Despite the risks, Ethan didn't hesitate. We have to try. If there's even a chance we can bring Lily back, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Over the next several days, the three of them worked tirelessly to prepare the experiment. Dr. Ross modified the machine in her lab, adding components to generate specific sound frequencies and electromagnetic pulses. Meanwhile, Ethan and Ryan gathered additional data from the asylum, combing through old files and piecing together more details about the original experiments. They discovered that the project had been abandoned after several test subjects reported bizarre side effects, including memory loss and hallucinations. As the final preparations came together, tension filled the air. None of them knew what to expect once the machine was activated. Would it work? Would they find Lily? Or would they open a door to something far more dangerous? Finally, the day arrived. The lab was eerily quiet as Dr. Ross powered up the machine, its lights flickering to life. A low hum filled the room, growing louder as the device reached full capacity. Sparks danced along the edges of the metallic frame, and a shimmering portal began to form in the center of the apparatus. It started as a small ripple, like heat waves rising off asphalt, but quickly expanded into a swirling vortex of light and color. Ethan stared at the portal, his heart pounding. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a gateway to the unknown. He glanced at Ryan and Dr. Ross, who were monitoring the readings on nearby screens. Everything seemed stable, for now. You ready? Dr. Ross asked, looking directly at Ethan. He took a deep breath, nodding firmly. Let's do this. With that, Ethan stepped forward, his eyes locked on the swirling colors ahead. As he approached the portal, he felt a strange pull, as though invisible hands were drawing him closer. The world around him blurred, and for a moment he wondered if he was making a terrible mistake. But then he remembered Lily's words in the notebook. The longing, the hope, the fear. And he pushed, forward without hesitation. In an instant he was gone, swallowed by the shimmering void. Behind him, Ryan and Dr. Ross. When Ethan stepped through the portal, he wasn't sure what to expect. He had braced himself for pain or disorientation, but instead, the transition was surprisingly smooth. One moment, he was standing in the lab, staring at the swirling vortex. The next, he found himself in a place unlike anything he'd ever seen. The world around him shimmered and shifted constantly, as though it couldn't decide on a single form. The sky was a kaleidoscope of colors, pinks, purples, and golds blending seamlessly into one another. The ground beneath his feet felt solid enough, though it sparkled faintly, like crushed gemstones had been scattered across its surface. Floating, orbs of light drifted lazily in the air, casting an ethereal glow over everything. It was beautiful, but also deeply unsettling. Nothing here followed the rules of the world he knew. Ethan took a cautious step forward, his heart racing. "Lily," he called out, his voice echoing strangely as if the sound were being stretched and distorted. There was no immediate response, only the soft hum of energy surrounding him. He tried again, louder this time. "Lily, Are you here? This time there was a reaction, not from Lily, but from the environment itself. The floating lights began to swirl faster, forming patterns that seemed almost deliberate. Shadows moved in the periphery of his vision, fleeting glimpses of shapes that vanished before he could focus on them. It was as if the world itself were alive, responding to his presence. As he ventured deeper into the surreal landscape, Ethan noticed structures rising from the horizon. They looked like buildings, but they weren't made of brick or steel. Instead, they appeared to be constructed from translucent crystal, their surfaces refracting the ever-changing light into dazzling rainbows. These structures seemed to pulse, gently, as if breathing. Ethan approached one cautiously, reaching out to touch its surface. The moment his fingers brushed against it, a wave of warmth spread through his body, accompanied by a flood of images in his mind. Fragments of memories, some familiar, others completely alien. He pulled his hand back quickly, startled. Whatever this place was, it didn't operate by the same logic as the real world. Time and space felt fluid here, bending and twisting unpredictably. Memories manifested physically, taking shape as glowing objects or fleeting illusions. Ethan realized that navigating this dimension would require more than just physical movement. It would demand mental strength and clarity. Despite the strangeness of his surroundings, Ethan pressed on, driven by the hope of finding Lily. As he walked, he began to hear faint whispers carried on the wind. At first they were indistinct, mere murmurs without meaning. But gradually, they grew clearer, forming words that tugged at his heart. "Dad," came a voice so soft it might have been imagined. Yet Ethan recognized it instantly. It was Lily's voice. "Lily," he shouted, spinning around to locate the source. "Where are you?" The whispers grew louder, guiding him toward a secluded glade surrounded by glowing trees. Their trunks emitted a faint luminescence, casting a gentle light over the area. In the center of the clearing stood a young woman who looked older yet unchanged, her eyes reflecting years of hardship and resilience. She wore simple clothes, faded and worn, but her presence radiated calmness. "Dad," she said again, her voice trembling with emotion. "You came." Ethan rushed to her, pulling her into a tight embrace. Tears streamed down his face as he held her close, unable to believe she was truly there. For 5 long years he had feared the worst, but now she was alive, standing right in front of him. "I never stopped looking for you," he whispered, his voice choked with tears. "I thought I'd lost you forever." Lily hugged him back, her own tears falling freely. When they finally pulled apart, she looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. "I didn't mean to leave," she explained. "It happened during the experiments. I got pulled into this place and I couldn't find my way back." Ethan listened intently as Lily recounted her experiences. She described how the beings inhabiting this realm were fragments of human consciousness, lost souls trapped between dimensions. Over time, she had learned to communicate with them and even manipulate certain aspects of the environment. With their help, she had managed to open temporary bridges back to the real world, but each attempt weakened the barrier between dimensions, threatening to collapse it entirely. "We can't stay here," Ethan said firmly. "We need to get you home." Lily nodded, though her expression was troubled. "I've tried before, Dad. Every time something goes wrong, this place, it doesn't want to let go." Ethan gripped her shoulders reassuringly. "We'll figure it out together. We're not leaving without you." With renewed determination, father and daughter began planning their escape. They gathered strength from the conscious fragments aiding them, knowing that crossing back would require every ounce of courage and resolve they possessed. Though the journey ahead promised danger and uncertainty, Ethan felt a surge of hope. Against all odds, he had found Lily, and now they would face whatever came next side by side. Ethan and Lily stood together in the glowing glade, their hearts pounding with anticipation. They knew that escaping this dimension wouldn't be easy, but they had no choice. Every moment they stayed put weakened the barrier between worlds, making it harder, not just for them, but for everyone else caught in this strange place. With Dr. Ross and Ryan waiting on the other side of the portal, time was running out. Lily turned to Ethan, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Dad, we'll need help from the fragments here. Without them stabilizing the path, we won't make it through." Ethan nodded, trusting her judgment. Over the years, Lily had learned how to communicate with the beings trapped in this realm. Shadows of human consciousness, unable to return to their original realities. These fragments existed in a state of limbo, aware of their surroundings but unable to fully interact with them. Yet somehow Lily had earned their trust. She explained that they could guide the two of them toward the portal while shielding them from the chaos threatening to tear the dimension apart. "Are you ready?" Lily asked, gripping his hand tightly. "As ready as I'll ever be," Ethan replied, steeling himself for what lay ahead. Together they stepped out of the glade and into the shifting landscape beyond. Almost immediately the environment began to change. The once peaceful terrain transformed into something far more hostile. Jagged cracks spread across the ground, glowing faintly as though molten lava flowed beneath the surface. The floating orbs of light spun erratically, casting wild shadows that danced menacingly around them. Whispers filled the air, growing louder and more frantic, as if the dimension itself was resisting their departure. "This way," Lily shouted over the noise, pointing toward a distant glow. The portal. It shimmered faintly in the distance, pulsating like a heartbeat. Though it seemed impossibly far away, Ethan focused on it, refusing to let doubt creep in. As they ran, the fragments of consciousness began to manifest around them. Ethereal shapes took form, some resembling people, others nothing more than abstract outlines. They moved in unison, forming a protective barrier around Ethan and Lily as they pushed forward. Despite their efforts, the journey was anything but smooth. The ground continued to crack and shift, forcing them to leap over widening fissures. At one point, Ethan nearly lost his footing, but Lily yanked him back just in time. "We're almost there," she yelled, her voice strained with effort. Behind them, shadowy figures emerged from the chaos, reaching out as if trying to pull them back. Ethan glanced over his shoulder, his stomach sinking at the sight. Were these more fragments or something darker? He couldn't tell, and he didn't want to find out. All he could do was keep moving, focusing on the portal ahead. The closer they got, the more unstable the environment became. The portal flickered violently, its edges fraying like torn fabric. Energy surged outward in unpredictable bursts, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. One such wave knocked Ethan off balance and he stumbled, landing hard on the uneven ground. Pain shot through his knees, but he forced himself to stand, unwilling to give up now. "Come on, Dad," Lily urged, pulling him upright. Her face was streaked with sweat and dirt, but her determination never wavered. With the last of their strength, they reached the threshold of the portal. The swirling vortex loomed before them, inviting yet terrifying. Beyond it, they could see glimpses of the real world. The lab, Dr. Ross adjusting controls, Ryan watching anxiously. It felt like a lifetime since Ethan had stepped through, yet everything seemed frozen in time. "Go," Lily shouted, pushing him forward. "I'll follow right behind you." Ethan hesitated, unwilling to leave her even for a second. But then, he saw the desperation in her eyes and realized she needed him to trust her. Summoning every ounce of courage, he leaped into the portal, feeling the familiar tug of energy pulling him through. Colors blurred together as reality bent and twisted around him. For a brief moment, he thought he might be lost forever. But then, with a jolt, he landed hard on the cold floor of the lab. Gasping for breath, Ethan scrambled to his feet, searching frantically for Lily. Seconds later, she appeared, tumbling through the portal just as it began to collapse. The machine sputtered and sparked, throwing off waves of heat as the rift closed completely. Smoke filled the room, and alarms blared loudly, signaling an overload in the system. Dr. Ross rushed to shut down the equipment, her hand. The days following Lily's return were a whirlwind of emotions for the Grant family. Ethan and Claire hugged their daughter tightly every chance they got, afraid that letting go might mean losing her again. For 5 long years they had lived, with unanswered questions, haunted by the thought that Lily was gone forever. Now, having her back felt like a miracle, but it wasn't without its challenges. Lily struggled to adjust to life outside the dimension she had been trapped in. Everything seemed louder, brighter, and faster than she remembered. Simple tasks like using a phone or walking through crowded streets overwhelmed her senses. She often found herself staring at objects or people, trying to reconcile what she saw now with the fragmented versions of reality she had experienced in the other realm. But despite these difficulties, she was determined to rebuild her life. Ethan did his best to support her, though he knew there were parts of her story he couldn't fully understand. One evening, after everyone else had gone to bed, father and daughter sat together in the living room. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Outside, the city buzzed faintly, but inside, the house felt quiet and safe. "Dad," Lily began hesitantly, breaking the silence. "There's something I need to tell you about where I was." Ethan turned to face her, his expression calm but attentive. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. It wasn't just a empty space. There were others there, people who got stuck like me. Fragments of their minds, their memories. They helped me survive, taught me things I never would have learned otherwise. She paused, looking down at her hands. But staying there came at a cost. Every time I tried to leave, the dimension fought back. It didn't want to let us go. Ethan nodded slowly, processing what she was saying. "And those beings, the fragments, they're still there?" "Yes," Lily replied quietly. "Some of them can't escape. They don't even remember who they used to be anymore. But they're alive in a way, trapped between worlds." Her voice trembled slightly as she continued. "I promised them I'd try to help. If we could figure out how to stabilize the portal, maybe we could bring them back too. Or at least give them peace." Ethan felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't considered the fate of the others trapped in that strange place. All his focus had been on bringing Lily home. Now, hearing her talk about the fragments, he realized how much responsibility weighed on her shoulders. "We'll find a way," he said firmly, placing a hand on hers. "You're not alone in this anymore. We'll work with Dr. Ross and Ryan to see what we can do." Lily smiled faintly, grateful for his support. "Thank you, Dad. That means more than you know." In the weeks that followed, Ethan arranged meetings with Dr. Emily Ross to discuss their next steps. Together, they reviewed the data from the experiment that had brought Lily back, searching for clues about how to safely reopen the portal. Ryan joined them, offering practical insights and helping gather additional resources. Though none of them dared to attempt another crossing immediately, they agreed that understanding the nature of the dimension was crucial. Dr. Ross explained that the experiments conducted at the asylum had likely tapped into quantum entanglement, a two-rao phenomenon where particles remain connected across vast distances or dimensions. By manipulating electromagnetic fields and sound frequencies, the original researchers had inadvertently created tears in the fabric of reality. These tears allowed access to alternate planes of existence, but destabilized the barriers between them. "If we refine our methods," Dr. Ross said during one meeting, "we might be able to create a controlled passage, one that minimizes risk to both sides." While the science fascinated Ethan, he couldn't ignore the ethical implications. What right did they have to interfere with another dimension? Could they truly ensure no harm came to either world? These questions weighed heavily on him, but Lily's conviction kept him moving forward. She believed helping the fragments was worth the effort, and so did he. As they worked, life slowly returned to normal for the Grants. Claire threw herself into organizing family dinners and outings, eager to make up for lost time. Neighbors and friends marveled at Lily's sudden reappearance, accepting the vague explanation of amnesia due to trauma. Only Ethan, Claire, and a handful of trusted allies knew the truth, and they intended to keep it that way. One afternoon, while walking through the park with her parents, Lily stopped to watch children playing near the fountain. Their laughter echoed brightly, reminding her of simpler times before everything changed. Turning to Ethan, she asked, "Do you think we'll ever really understand what happened to me?" He smiled softly, putting an arm around her shoulders. Maybe not completely, but we don't have to have all the answers right away. What matters is that you're here, with us. That's enough for now. For the first time in years, Lily felt a sense of belonging. Though scars remained from her ordeal, she was surrounded by love and hope. And as long as her family stood by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Questions lingered, and dangers still lurked in the unknown. But for now, the Grants cherished the gift of reunion, finding strength in each other as they prepared to tackle the mysteries of dimensions beyond their own. Months had passed since Lily's return, and life for the Grant family settled into a new rhythm. While Ethan and Claire cherished every moment with their daughter, they also understood that her journey wasn't over. The fragments, those lost souls trapped between dimensions, still lingered in Lily's mind, their whispers occasionally, surfacing in quiet moments. She often spoke about them to her parents, describing their longing for peace and resolution. It was clear that helping them had become a mission she couldn't ignore. Ethan knew they couldn't tackle this alone. Together with Dr. Emily Ross, Ryan Cole, and Lily, he formed a foundation dedicated to studying dimensional phenomena responsibly. Their goal was twofold: to better understand the science behind crossing dimensions, and to ensure that any future attempts were safe for both worlds involved. They called it the Dimensional Awareness Initiative, or DAI for short. The team met regularly at Dr. Ross's lab, which had been expanded to accommodate their growing project. Large whiteboards covered the walls, filled with notes, sketches, and equations. A computer simulation of the portal they'd used to bring Lily back ran continuously, allowing them to analyze its behavior without risking another live experiment. Each meeting brought new insights, but also new challenges. One afternoon, as the group gathered around the table, Dr. Ross presented her latest findings. Based on our data, she explained, pointing to a graph on the screen, the portal destabilized because we didn't account for resonance frequencies properly. If we adjust those, we might be able to stabilize the connection long enough to retrieve more fragments or even send them somewhere safer. Lily listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. Though she didn't fully grasp the technical details, she trusted Dr. Ross's expertise. What happens to the fragments once we bring them through, she asked. Will they just disappear? Dr. Ross hesitated before answering. That's the tricky part. We don't know exactly what will happen. Some may reintegrate into our reality, while others might dissipate entirely. But either way, it could give them closure, which is what they seem to want most, Ryan chimed in, his tone practical. We'll need to test this carefully, maybe start with smaller scale experiments before attempting anything major. Everyone nodded in agreement. Patience was key. Rushing into things had nearly cost them everything last time. Over the next few weeks, the team worked tirelessly to refine their methods. They built a smaller version of the original machine, designed specifically for controlled trials. Instead of opening a full portal, it would create a temporary rift, just wide enough to observe the other side. Their first trial took place late one evening after hours of preparation. The machine hummed softly as it powered up, casting a faint blue glow across the lab. This time, instead of stepping through themselves, they monitored the rift remotely using cameras and sensors. What they saw on the screens was both fascinating and heartbreaking. Through the rift, ghostly shapes moved slowly, their forms flickering like static on a television screen. Some appeared human-like, while others were abstract and indistinct. Voices echoed faintly, speaking in languages no one recognized, or perhaps not even words at all. Despite the strangeness, there was a sense of yearning in their movements, as if they were reaching out for help. It's working, Dr. Ross whispered, her voice filled with awe. We're actually seeing them. Lily watched the screen closely, tears welling in her eyes. These were the beings who had helped her survive, who had kept her sane during her time in the other dimension. Now she felt a deep responsibility to repay their kindness. After several successful trials, the team decided it was time to attempt bringing some of the fragments through. Using precise calculations and advanced shielding, they opened a slightly larger rift. One by one, the shapes crossed over, materializing briefly in the lab before dissolving into streams of light. Though their presence was fleeting, the team could feel a shift in the air, as if the weight of countless unresolved stories had finally lifted. As the experiments continued, word of their work spread cautiously within scientific circles. While many dismiss it,